So CES 2023 hasn't even officially started yet, but already we've gotten some announcements and some additional information about those. So linked below, I'll put my previous two videos for the initial announcements from LG and Samsung for what they're bringing in 2023 for their OLEDs. In this video, it's kind of going to be me jumping around a little bit and thinking out loud, and it's a little bit more speculation based on the information that is given. But I think it should give a more realistic expectation versus what the marketing says. And we're going to compare the 2023 LG MLA G3 model with, well, we don't know for sure what the Samsung actual model is going to be because the announcement was from Samsung Display, not Electronics. So it's the division that makes the display. So this can be to Sony or Samsung. But we'll just, for sake of argument, say it's Samsung. All right. So in the previous video, well, both of them, both companies, their tagline is 2000 nits for their OLEDs in 2023. And each of them are marketing 2000 nits differently. So with LG, when I showed from the Flat Panels HD article, they were saying 2100 nits in vivid mode and approximately 1800 in a normal mode. So let's just assume that was D65. But it didn't specify like window sizes or anything more in depth. Now, normally LG would use 10%, maybe 5% as what they state their numbers at, but without that specifically being said, can't say for sure. Now, for Samsung, we know from last year when Samsung Display announced the QD OLED that it was going to be 1500 nits at a 2 or 3% window or smaller. And it turned out the S95B was able to do that for a few seconds at a time before later it got reduced to 1000 with a firmware update. The panel itself, it's what the panel's capable of, and then it's up to which company buys the panels and how they want to sell them and what they're going to program them to be. So like Sony was only at 1000 nits last year with the A95K. So, even though this panel is capable in 2023 of 2000 nits, it doesn't mean that that's going to be the case once it gets into an actual model. So the difference in these announcements was the last Samsung or the Samsung video. I had said that these announcements were both the display divisions. That was a mistake. The LG announcement was actually LG Electronics, and that's why they were announcing the actual models and why they won't say MLA exactly. And if you remember last year, like they wouldn't say EX panel, they wouldn't say, the specific names that we get from the display manufacturing side of LG Display. So because it was the model announcements and just more marketing terms, that was an LG Electronics announcement. But from Samsung, it's the announcement from Samsung Display, who makes the actual panels. So a little bit more digging. John Archer from Forbes, his article here, kind of goes over the same stuff we already knew, but he did apparently a little more digging. Not sure, exactly what happened. But here it says Samsung didn't say in its press announcement exactly how it had measured the 2000 nit figure, but he's been able to confirm that 2000 nits was generated on a 3% window, and that at 10% windows, it's 1500 nits. And then it goes on with a little bit more detail, and this is the interesting part. So after discussing that it's, going to be in the same range as the G3, this is the interesting part down here. So 1500 nits in a 10% window is not with what they're referring to as reference black. So an OLED isn't exactly zero black. It's 0.0005 or lower. So that means that it's sacrificing black level in order to get to 1500 nits. Otherwise, to keep it at 0.005 or lower, 10% window measurement may reduce to around 1300 nits. So in that case, it's about a 30% improvement over last year models, which is more in line with an expected year-to-year change. and not a, doubling or 50% improvement or, something that large. Now, the other piece of information here that is still missing that I would like to have is the full screen measurement also going to go up about 30% or not? If it does, that would be very nice. But, again, it doesn't say, so we can't know for sure. Then goes on to say about, reduction in power. That's nice for those that are affected by it. Um, and then more claims, just the 90% BT 2020, same as last year that we knew. And then we get to this part. So about the lack of a polarizing filter from last year, it's going to continue to be the same this year. So those rumors saying that they were going to add the polarizer this year were incorrect. They did confirm that it's going to be the same. No polarizer. So that means in direct light hitting the screen, it will slightly raise the black floor. Now, for some people, that's an issue. For me personally, never really was, but I also don't have lights hitting the screen directly. And when I tested it, it had to be a very bright light, fairly close to the display, in order for it to get to a point that it was very noticeable. So, for a lot of people, it's not really an issue, but for some, it is. The other issue with QD OLED is the color fringing from the triangle shape of the pixels, where you get the green and pink lines. So for me, that is more of an issue, although I know for most people that's not an issue. For me, when I'm watching something with black bars top and bottom, and it's a really bright scene, so say, a sky is at the top of the screen and then you have the black bar, I can see that colored line against that black bar from normal seating distance with QD OLED. Other people don't see it. I think it's one of those things that once you do, you just become aware of it and you can't unsee it. And then the third issue with QD OLED is the transition from black to very, very dark gray just out of black is slow. So that pixel response is slow, and then that can create trailing in dark scenes. And specifically, it's more of an issue, I would say, for gaming. So when you're playing a game in a very dark area that has black and dark grays, and you're moving the camera around quickly, you'll see that smearing, kind of like how if you watch any monitor reviews, and a lot of monitors that use VA panels aren't liked for gaming because of that near black smearing. Now, it's not to that extent bad, but it's similar. So, and then to focus now more on the LG side of things and their 2000 nit claim. So John Archer, also again from Forbes, he has different numbers than the flat panels HD. The up to 70% brightness increase over traditional OLEDs still stays the same. And then this is kind of with the last video, didn't add up to me, because if you add 70% to what they say a traditional OLED, which would be like the new B3 series, and let's just say that's 750 nits, that's putting you just under 1300. So the 1800 nit number in that article, I don't know where it came from. And that's why, I put below that last video that I would expect more like 1600 nits, depending. Um, Now, are they going to hit 2000 under certain situations? Probably. Like this is saying, it's expecting G3 to hit 1500 on a 10% window and more than 2000 on a 2% window. So it looks like LG is now going to push these smaller windows more than they have before. Usually 1, 2, 5, and 10 are fairly close, within 50 to 100 nits on LG displays. But that seems possibly to be changing so that you get more of uh, a punch with the smaller size highlights, but we'll have to see for sure. Um, that said, again, none of this specifies if it's D65 or not. The previous article said 2100 nits was for vivid. So there's still, you know, uh, some of this you got to take with a grain of salt. Some of it you got to try and look through what the marketing is saying. Now, the G2 brought what they claimed last year was a 30% increase over the other models, and that was right. So this saying that we're getting a 70% over traditional OLEDs. I think 1300 at D65 is going to be, like the bottom end of what we can expect. I would say maybe 1400 is probably more consistently what we'll see. Again, this is after calibration to D65 and a 10% window. Maybe 1500 on the higher end, and then the upwards towards 2000 nits on small windows maybe. um, but basically from LG and Samsung, they're both using these tricky ways of being able to claim 2000 nits without lying. So the other thing to keep in mind though, let me share a different screen here. As I've discussed previously, and I've shown this before, so this is a graph of my personal G2, which measures 900 nits or 905, um, anywhere from a small to a 10% window, very consistently too. And this is at D65. But with the new pattern that I have from Stacy Spears, that is not a window measurement, and instead it's a constantly changing scene. So there's colors throughout the entire screen with a white dot that is your HDR highlight, and the scene is constantly changing in its brightness. There's two versions of this test, one with average APL or average picture level, and then one with a higher average picture level. So that would simulate a brighter scene. But with an average scene on the G2, even though it only measures 900 on a window pattern, on this, it does just about hit 1100. So there is room where it'll go higher when it's not detecting that it's just a window. Now, another thing to notice here, though, is I've noticed this on all the WRGB OLEDs. It'll start out strong and then it kind of starts to run out. So this is over a 1 minute period of time. And it's like a reading here, reading here, reading here, reading here, all the way through for a minute. And we can see that, not too long into the test, it does start to dip. And then we get some of these like spikes real low, comes back up and recovers, but it does stay pretty consistent here, above 900 for the most part. But now when we compare this to a QD OLED, so let me go to the A95K, also at D65. While it doesn't quite hit as bright as the G2, it does hold it the entire time. It's very consistent. Now, that's the QD OLED with a heatsink. And then let me go to the S95B, which is QD OLED without a heatsink. And it's pretty much the same thing. So even without the heatsink, it can hold that consistent luminance. So this is another advantage of QD OLED. It just seems to have more stable luminance. And like if I go back here, so like here's an 83-inch C1. That was the high APL though. Hang on. All right, so here's a 77-inch C2. You can see how it's not very consistent. And then we have a 83-inch C1. This was more consistent, but it was also much lower at 700 nits. And so here's A95K with the higher APL version of the test, where it will drop, but not quite a lot, or at least not nearly as much as I have an A90J here. Where is it? Yeah, so here's an A90J with the higher APL version of the same test. And you can see much more dipping, as low as 300 nits. So the QD OLED, even if it doesn't get quite as bright as the WRGB, it can maintain and hold that luminance more consistently. Now, obviously, everyone also talks a lot about the color, and people use color luminance, and they incorrectly use that. In the future, we'll talk more about color luminance, or not color volume. There's a distinct nuance between color luminance and color volume, and how that relates to with color gamut and saturation. And that's a long discussion we will have in the future. But yes, QD OLED can get colors brighter, and it has a wider color gamut. The issue there, not really an issue, but there's not enough content that can actually take advantage of that. So it's not that much of an advantage for QD OLED at this point in time. I would say the consistency to its luminance and also the lack of any color tinting across the screen for its uniformity are the biggest advantages for QD OLED. So with these announcements, I would say completely ignore the 2000 nit taglines that we're seeing. Even if they do technically hit 2000 nits for both of them, it's a pointless stat. Um, Now, both of these I expect also to be somewhere around 250 nits full field. That is going to be a more important figure, as that's a easy correlation to how bright it can get in the bright higher APL scenes. I do think QD OLED will be a little bit higher, maybe 260, 270 nits. And I think the MLA G3 is going to be, say, 230, 240, somewhere in that range. Again, this is after calibration of D65. These are just estimates, um, but I think that's what we would see. So, for the most part, they're going to be very, very similar. It's going to be a tight race. Um, like I said, there's some drawbacks to QD OLED. Some might bother you, some might not. And then the drawbacks for the WRGB OLEDs, we already know. The main one, at least for me personally, is the pink tinting. The vertical banding uniformity isn't that much of an issue, at least at 77 inches. Hopefully, the larger sizes get that fixed, and hopefully, the 65-inch doesn't have that thick pink whole like left quarter of the screen that seems to be on like pretty much every 65-inch that I've seen. So hopefully that gets addressed as well. Um, so it'll be interesting to see all these as they come out, and I'll be doing my best to review all of them. But I just wanted to put this out there to kind of ramble and just go over just this little bit more information that we have, and that the 2000 nit measurement, like I said, they technically can get it, um, but they're not the numbers you should be looking at. So, all right. Thank you all for watching. I hope this helps, and I will see you in the next one.